Welcome everyone. Through this video presentation you are about to watch, we aim to give you a complete yet concise overview of our project with a specific focus on our approach to monitoring and evaluation. Firstly, I am going to give you a quick overview of the project and its aims in order to contextualize the information that follows. After this, Michaela will provide an explanation as to why the project needs a specific monitoring and evaluation framework before briefly introducing you to the theory behind why the approach we have used is most appropriate. The feedback systems approach as the model of evaluation we aim to use will then be outlined in order to explain why we see this as the most effective way of measuring project outcomes. It allows participation from the community by having the ability to collate both qualitative and quantitative data in order to ensure that the project remains on task. Following on from this, Courtney will give you a breakdown of the practical plan as to how the feedback systems approach will be carried out. Through this, she will outline the good practice principles for using feedback systems, as well as outlining the 6 important elements that are used to form the feedback loop. This provides information on how, why, and from whom the data is collected, as well as how and by whom it will be analyzed. This information will then be presented in the form of an evaluation matrix to show how this information has been transferred into a practical tool for use by project management. Jade will then discuss the resources needed in order to conduct the monitoring and evaluation plan that we have outlined, so you are able to formulate a clear picture of how the framework will be implemented. Finally, we make mention of how we plan to adapt to diverse stakeholder interests, before concluding with a brief outline on how this methodology will inform further practice and feedback into the project cycle. Therefore, at the end of this presentation, you should have a clear picture of the feedback systems approach to monitoring and evaluation, why we have chosen to use this approach for this particular project, and exactly how it will be implemented and what resources will be needed in order to do this. The project can be most easily understood according to its 2 mutually reinforcing outcomes, that of food security and education, or more broadly, awareness. They are mutually reinforcing as without good quality food, one cannot function in a capacity that allows for a meaningful life, which includes the ability to learn. Secondly, without education and the awareness of the importance of good food, one remains ignorant to the effects of malnutrition upon our capacity to function to a certain ability. Research from DFID as well as countless other sources has shown that education relating to agriculture and environmental experiences generally greatly contributes to increasing food security, as people become more aware of the importance of nutrition, resilience, and rural development more broadly. The way in which the project aims to make an impact in these 2 areas is 1. To increase access to local organic food, and 2. To increase awareness, specifically relating to the importance of good food. Food security is defined as the ability of individuals, households, and communities to acquire appropriate and nutritious food on a regular and reliable basis using socially acceptable means. This security is built upon 3 pillars: food availability, food access, and food use, which therefore includes the knowledge of basic nutrition as well as water and sanitation. The community that we are working with consists of around 150 households, making the total permanent population around 900 people. Therefore, in order to address the issues outlined above, we are aiming to achieve the following outputs. In regards to food security, we aim to increase households' consumption of 50% greater variety of food than that which is currently consumed, and that at least 50% of this food is coming from the local area, which is set at being within a 50-kilometer radius. Secondly, we also aim to increase awareness and general knowledge within the community about the importance of local, good quality food. Both of these outcomes will be achieved through the community farm, which allows community members to be a part of every stage of food production. The practical implementation of the community farm has already been established through action research groups, which identified which crops will be grown, who is responsible for organizing the maintenance of those crops, and how the food will be distributed once harvested. The very same action research groups will form the basis of how education will be delivered to the broader community. The community farm serves as both a food production center as well as a hub for community participation through which people learn about the importance of locally grown, nutritious food.
As Robert Chambers asserts, prior to an increase in methods of participatory monitoring and evaluation, most development practitioners did not have the skills or knowledge in order to allow those most directly impacted by an intervention to express, share, and extend their knowledge towards the development process. This often resulted in the most marginalized groups, often the ones organizations were intending to help, continuing to be silenced and disempowered. With this in mind, we have elected to implement a participatory approach to the monitoring and evaluation of this project. Increasing the empowerment of local Indigenous communities, which this project will benefit, presents an opportunity for the population to have considerate ownership over its implementation and outcomes. As Osvaldo Feinstein and Tony Beck have stated, with direct ownership in this manner, this increases the likelihood that information and lessons learned will be practically applied in the long term. We believe that the involvement of those most directly impacted by the intervention in this process will allow the incorporation of viewpoints not often heard from some aspects of the population. This could potentially also highlight particular issues which may have been overlooked. We have decided to use the feedback system of monitoring and evaluation. This is in recognition of the need for substantial data to monitor the services provided by the project in order to determine whether the intended objectives have been achieved. We acknowledge that the people who this project directly impacts will have the greatest awareness and opinion on whether intended outcomes have been successful in most instances. This is reflected by Alex Jacobs, Chris Barnett, and Richard Ponsford in understanding that there is a powerful practical case that the people who are best placed to assess how well an intervention is meeting local priorities are the intended beneficiaries themselves. The feedback cycle focuses on 6 key elements which highlight the relationship and sharing of information between the organisation as implementers and the local participants. These include what the information is about, who and where from the data is collected, in what ways this data is generated, how it is analysed, who is provided with the new information, and finally, how it will then be used to the benefit of all stakeholders involved. Information collected through the feedback system allows us to analyse and understand our relationship with the community or individuals with which we are working with in the implementation of this project. This information can be used in collaboration with local participants in the development process to guide actions which will have a positive and sustainable impact into the future.
Our monitoring and evaluation plan will utilise the feedback system. The hypothetical project that we're basing our plan on is actually in the second phase of its delivery. Phase 1 saw the establishment of a community farm and has already had M&E in place. We are now looking at applying M&E processes through your feedback system for Phase 2. Step 1 will conduct a mapping of the community to understand its dynamics. This will determine who holds the positions of authority and power, what community organisations or associations exist that the project may align with, what culturally respectful, appropriate processes should be followed if the project was to facilitate the establishment of a new community committee. Step 2. Acknowledging that the inclusion of community members is a key factor in improving project performance is why we will be working with a community committee. To ensure gender inclusiveness, the committee will require a percentage of members to be women. Step 3. The community committee will co-develop a household survey with the project facilitators. The survey will include questions that address the information required by donors, the community, and the project. The survey tool will gather both qualitative and quantified perceptual data through the use of closed and open-ended questions. Step 4. The survey will be tested on a small sample of the community and the questions reviewed and edited with the community committee. Step 5. If the project has community members employed as part of their team, these members will be trained and supported to conduct the survey. If there are not community members on the team, the members of the community will be employed, trained and supported to conduct the survey in households at 12 months and 18 months. Surveys will be quantitatively and qualitatively summarised and analysed. Step 7. Findings will be written into a main report and then used in 3 different forums. In a written report to the donors, in a report and briefing to the community, in a report to Project Management Committee. Step 8. Findings will be discussed with the community committee. Actions will be identified by the community committee and negotiated with the project coordinators. Step 9. The agreed actions will be built into the project, and Step 10. The survey will be repeated back at 18 months, completing the feedback loop. It is important to be aware of the fact that the selection process for community committee members and the survey questions decided upon will have included and excluded community narratives and members. It is critical that this is acknowledged, questioned as to why, and considered in terms of how it affects the data and thereby the feedback system. Systems Matrix goal is to contribute towards improving nutrition and child education in one remote northern Queensland Indigenous community, with the purpose of increasing access to local and sustainable food sources, and an outcome of food security. Output 1.1 increases access to fresh fruit and vegetables, and output 1.2 increases awareness about nutrition and food systems. The next two slides highlight the feedback systems matrix that we developed. They use the 6 steps of the feedback loop, identify a community as key sources of data, and use the household survey as the key tool.
In Part 7, I will be discussing how we will estimate the resources we will need for our monitoring and evaluation plan. The resources will be estimated from the program activities. These activities are primarily participatory in nature, and as a result, our resource estimation will be minimal. The resource calculations will be measured from the monitoring activities from Phase 2 of our project. The benefit of this type of approach is that exit strategies and risk management can be assessed in a manner that will be contextual and localized in nature. A direct result of this will be the economic sustainability of our project. This approach will allow for an economic and timely monitoring process for generating quantitative and qualitative feedback data as per good practice principles for using feedback systems methods. For example, the monitoring and evaluation plan will focus on a participatory approach to ensure economic resource costs. Our plan will focus on a key factor in efficient and participatory project monitoring and evaluation practice, which is early introduction and implementation. Therefore, our monitoring and evaluation plan can be conducted continuously throughout the project cycle and be participatory in nature. However, one external factor that we will consider is teaching our monitoring and evaluation strategy to community members. The ability of these members to conduct our monitoring and evaluation process successfully is a risk management factor. In Part 9, I will discuss how we will address potential stakeholder conflicts. Our monitoring and evaluation strategy will attempt to balance multiple stakeholder interests, which can cause many challenges. The views of stakeholders are often diverse and reflect different political and organisational interests. Our monitoring and evaluation framework has identified the importance of recognising and mediating diverse social perspectives and positions that can result in potential stakeholder conflicts. As a result, we will establish a local evaluator who has knowledge and experience of negotiation skills.
According to preeminent international development scholar Corton, 1980, M&E must incorporate flexibility, learning, reflection, and a revised acting out in a virtuous and iterative process. However, this learning is often neglected in various stages of the project cycle. In order to rectify this deficiency, we will strive to ensure that the feedback data that we generate is used for learning purposes. We will be open to being flexible and adapting our M&E framework in light of new information and changing circumstances. One mechanism to assist with this is the periodic evaluation, which has been incorporated into our M&E plan. These evaluations will ensure that we are constantly interrogating the relevance and usefulness of our framework and whether modifications can be made in order to maintain the applicability of our framework. The findings from this process will be discussed with local participants through community meetings.